Welcome to A Therapist, a Buddhist, and You, brought to you by the Recovery Collective in Annapolis, Maryland. We journey through self-discovery and collective solution to all things health and wellness. My name is Luke Du Bois, who happens to be a therapist, and joining me on this enlightening adventure is my co-host, a Theravada Buddhist meditation and life coach, Zaw Mal.
Hey, Luke. How's it going? Hi, everyone.
And together we'll explore the intersections of psychology, spirituality, health, and wellness, offering practical insights along the way. Thank you for tuning in and joining our collective community. Please communicate with us on all the social medias, of course, Facebook, TikTok, YouTube, you name it. They're in our episode notes as usual. We're here to provide you with valuable tools and perspectives that have the ability to transform your life. If you find our podcast helpful, we greatly appreciate your support. We like to call it our handshake agreement. We provide you with hopefully deep dives of valuable information, and you leave a like, comment, subscribe, and really most importantly, share our podcast with others. If you'd like to monetarily thank us, we've got that option now too. We welcome that as well. There's this heart donate button in all the episodes, and you're more than welcome to. Remember, it's through our collective efforts that we can uncover solutions to all things related to health and wellness. So today's let's navigate the challenges of early recovery. How does that sound?
That sounds good. Sounds like a continuation of the two-part episode we've done about addiction.
That's right. We did that early on where we really broke down some of the physiological aspects of the addiction as well as the solution towards addiction, and including an equation for recovery. Mm-hmm. And let's really deep dive in those early stages of recovery as individuals embark on a courageous journey toward reclaiming their lives through these clutches of addiction. It really is vicious. Mm. So people in early recovery face the challenges of detox, working through intense physical and psychological withdrawal symptoms. Even after that detox phase, however, another hurdle awaits. Sometimes we call it PAWS, or Post-Acute Withdrawal Syndrome. You ever heard of that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So a lot of us have heard of that. If who's ever been in treatment, it's often a quote-unquote group or insight that they get. And I think it's really important for whether it's people that are finding this podcast that are in early recovery or struggling with addiction. And we also have family members that check out this podcast that want to learn more about all things health and wellness when it comes to substance use and addiction and recovery.
Yeah, just out of curiosity, that term, I've heard of that. It's interesting. Is there like an intentional impact about that acronym of PAWS, PAWS?
Absolutely. It's the PAWS, not the stop and pause like you would your phone or YouTube or something like that. Mm-hmm. It's an acronym that stands for Post-Acute Withdrawal Syndrome. So if we look at that, it's after the acute withdrawal, which is detox. And syndrome is a fancy way to say a group of symptoms. So these are all the things that someone might experience after the acute withdrawal, the detox stage. That detox stage is 7, 10, 14 days. Insurance might say differently if you're in a detox facility or residential facility. But these are all the things that can happen really those 2 weeks after you stop using and you're not in that detox phase anymore.
Yeah, so we can dig into that. So what are the common symptoms?
Well, one of the reasons why it's so common, I got some of this information from Terence Gorski. He's pretty big and renowned and an old-timer when it comes to medical research and the recovery information when it comes to understanding a lot of the physiological aspects. But one of the statistics that he has is 75 to 95% of all addicts suffer from some kind of brain dysfunction. 75 to 95%. So what does that mean? It says brain dysfunction. Doesn't necessarily mean brain damage, but it's not functioning properly. Is that really a shocker? I don't think so. If we're using substances and abusing substances and you need detox, you need to get rid of the poison, well, it's going to affect your brain and body. It's just pretty much that simple. And because of that, it affects the central nervous system, which is the brain and spinal cord. When you go through the detox phase and you kind of get rid of those chemicals and those poisons out of your brain and body, it can still affect your brain and body for quite a long time. If you were have to take a guess, how long do you think, we know detox can last 7 to 14 days on average. How long do you think post-acute withdrawal would last? If detox is 14 days, how long do you think PAWS or these symptoms will last?
Yeah, I don't know. It might linger, right? The frequency and the intensity might decrease, but maybe it'll linger for a few months or more.
Keep going. There's been some research that says it can last up to 2 years. And one of the reasons why it can linger that long, often we see, certainly for that up to that year mark, but it can last for even longer. Well, it depends on two things. The amount of damage you do to yourself and the severity. As I mentioned, it affects the central nervous system. I always give that example of when I was, in my early 20s, I was living with a roommate, and he had one of those Reynolds wrap boxes that you'd find in restaurants that you would do cellophane or aluminum foil, and there's that little serrated edge. And it was on top of the freezer, and I opened the freezer and it fell, and it cut my left ring finger. And of course I'm left-handed, and of course at that time I was a really avid active climber, and it cut right through a nerve. And it's 10 plus years, 12 plus years since that happened, and it still doesn't quite feel the same way as it used to, and it certainly didn't for the first 6 months or longer, probably a year and a half. And when you sever a nerve, whether you have like an ACL knee surgery or Tommy John, that ulnar collateral ligament, and you cut through nerves, if anyone has a surgery, they know what it feels like. It's numb, it's tingly, and it takes very slow for a nerve to grow and heal itself and connect. Now, when we abuse substances, we are not severing our central nervous system. We're not severing our nerves, but we are certainly damaging the brain and spinal cord with poison. So if you think of it that way, yes, we're not cutting our spinal cord, but we are doing damage to our central nervous system. And if you look at it that way, some people are drinking and drugging for days, weeks, months, years, decades. The amount of damage after the detox, those 7 to 14 days, it could take up to 2 years for that brain to really, and that central nervous system to really rebound in a way that it used to. Think of smoking with the lungs. It can come back. It can recoup. It can heal itself. I mean, we are Wolverine. We are the world's most amazing puzzle, which I'm so fascinated by. So it can take potentially 2 years, especially if 75 to 95% of quote-unquote addicts have some kind of brain dysfunction. So it can take that long. Let's talk about some of these symptoms, right? Now, if this phenomenon occurs in the early recovery process, after the initial withdrawal phase, it can manifest in a bunch of different ways. So let's look at that, shall we?
Sounds good.
Okay. The first, once again, a syndrome is a group of symptoms. Let's look at the first one that I often talk about, and it's that inability to think clearly. So you're out of for those people that have been to detox, that Librium shuffle. You're out of that medication phase of detox, and you're getting your wits to you. Inability to think clearly. So let's talk about the how, why, and then what do you do about it? We know how. Damage from poisoning ourselves. Now, why do you think there's an inability to think clearly? What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, as you mentioned earlier, that brain dysfunction, the brain is not capable of doing its function properly or full capacity. But reflecting on my own experience, I'm grateful that these informations are available, Hopefully the clients are open to it and then to be aware of that. But when I was going through that, I had no idea. I was also back in Burma. So I was just powering through that. It would have been nice to know these things. But inability to think clearly, that's a tricky one, especially because people like alcoholics and addicts, myself, who has a really huge ego as an addict, So like to admit that I'm thinking not clearly, I don't want to admit that, because people are going to point out that you're not making sense. You're not thinking clearly, but I don't want to agree to that. That no, I'm good. I'm good.
Yeah, as a clinical director, hearing people say, "I got this. I'm good. I got this," was like, oh, it made me cringe. Almost like the kiss of death. Like, oh, you're not thinking clearly. I think that they could do it by themselves, and I got through the detox, so I must be okay now. This made me cringe when I heard people say, "I'm good. I got this."
Yeah,
and there's two symptoms of post-acute that I like to connect together, and we'll connect them and separate them: inability to think clearly and memory problems. So there's two different aspects of that. One way, in terms of inability to think clearly, we can break it down in terms of concentration. We can break it down in terms of abstract critical thinking. It's not an intelligence thing that we're saying, hey, your IQ was here and now it's not. It's not an intelligence that's affected. It's the inability to concentrate. It's the concrete logic ration part of the brain. Now, we certainly talked about this in those early episodes about the physiological aspects, but it's important to bring it up just briefly here in this episode, that the brain is damaged top to bottom. And we talk about we're forward thinkers. We've been gifted this frontal lobe called the cerebral cortex, which is responsible for ration, logic, reasoning, and things like that. We damage that part of the brain. So the medical model, I often say, parallels very clearly with the 12-step model. Medical model says, hey, your best thinking got you here, and you're using your rational logic and reasoning to maintain sobriety or minimize your substance use or prevent your relapses from happening. And if you're using just that alone, I'm a little concerned as a medical or an addictions therapist and professional, because that part of the brain is literally damaged. That part of the brain is dysfunctional. You've done damage to that part. So you're using your damaged logic to get you out of the situation, which keeps leading to this cycle of relapse. Step 1 says we admitted we were powerless over alcohol and that our lives have become unmanageable. Mm-hmm. Why? The medical model says we've damaged that part of the brain. Post-acute says I don't have the ability to think clearly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I also think of like inability to think clearly is, my lenses are of power kind of thing. Like,
meaning what?
Like if I'm wearing glasses and I'm off the power, the things are just blurry, but I'm like trying really hard to see things clearly.
Yeah.
But also like seeing things out of proportion as well, like making decisions based out of proportion. Because, that's the thing about the logic, being able to think reasonably, like pros and cons, ration, right and wrong, or based on experience, but that's like kind of out of balance. So making decisions based out of that, it's just...
Oh, yeah. I can relate it to not having brain dysfunction, but maybe not a fully developed brain. When I was first in love, or that puppy love, I had those rose-colored glasses. My ability to think clearly was certainly foggy from my my puppy love. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, the heartbreak, how could this happen? A lot of us have gone through that, and we see that with our, eventual children and other people. Now imagine that with a damaged brain, not just a developed brain, but a damaged brain. And I'll give a couple examples. After I went through treatment and went back to college, my inability to think clearly, my first thought was, hey, let me take some Adderall because I have a hard time reading this book. I have a hard time just putting sentences together so I can write a paper. So my first logic was, let me buy this Adderall from the kid down the dorm, and I'm not going to abuse it. That seems rational and logical to me. And I won't drink on it. I won't smoke on it. I won't abuse it, even though it's not subscribed to me. And I'll just be fine. That was my logic and reasoning, because my stress was through the roof. And I didn't know how to cope with this. And I said, okay, this has to be the solution. That was my logic. Mm-hmm. My brain was wired to find quick, easy solutions. And I know it wasn't my drug of choice. And I know it wasn't drinking. And I know it wasn't smoking mind-altering substances. Okay, let me not abuse that. And someone could give this to me as prescribed. Mm-hmm. not thinking of how that could alter my mind and mood, and that I always did use other substances on it, and that could trigger a relapse. But that was my logical thinking at that time.
Yeah, no wonder it is. I guess the wording that you used in the beginning was like challenges in early recovery, you know?
Yes.
So it describes it so well about that being a challenge.
Yes.
Because, I'm more curious as we keep talking about like, how do I even have hope that this will change? Because I've experienced that where I was unhappy at my own ability. What is wrong with me? And my only way of getting better or to deal with that inability to think after I've accepted is to go back to old ways, because that just like feels familiar. But then to think beyond that, that is almost like impossible to have hope that, oh, am I even going to get better?
Yeah.
Or am I going to stuck here, you know?
Before I give you that suggestion, let me just pile on some more stress real quick.
Okay, sounds good.
Another example of that inability is just that fuzzy thinking, or not being able to process the way you may want to. My example was I couldn't read or write a paper when I went back to school. For someone else, it might be things they didn't have to think about, working under the hood of a car or doing something on a computer. All these things might have been second nature to us. And now that we're in a different mind state, and there's been some proof that when you're out of detox, the brain is literally contracting and expanding, trying to find its normal steady state, trying to find its normal amount of chemicals. And this is after those 14 days, and my brain is trying to heal itself. Yeah, concentration and thinking clearly. One example I often give people is you hear something you like in a speech, or you're in class, or you listen to your boss or your TV and you try to remember it. Mm-hmm. Or if you're in a 12-step meeting and you really like what that person said, and like, oh, I like that. I love that. I don't want to forget it. So I start repeating it to myself so I don't forget it. And that third or fourth time I go, shit, what was I saying? Or what did he say? I forget that quickly.
Yeah.
So that compound thinking can be challenging, which is very stressful.
Yeah. Like in addition to that stress, speaking out of my own experience, is that my dysfunctional brain also concludes based on that experience that sobriety will not look good on me. Why do I want to be sober? This sucks, you know?
I can't do this.
Yeah.
Yeah. So let's give some suggestions, shall we?
All right.
One important thing is to limit the amount of time you spend on any task. Hopefully, no more than 15 to 20 to 25 minutes. So when I went to rehab at 20 years old, all I had to do was wake up. People fed me. They told me what class to go to. They gave me suggestions. They did everything except when I had to take a piss or shit, right? They controlled my life. And I absorbed all of that information that I could for 28 days. And I went, okay, here's all this information. I'm not in that altered state anymore. And you're giving me all this information. And then I left, and I was actually exhausted. I was tired. I was happy. I was on a pink cloud. But my goodness, I couldn't remember half the stuff that they told me. I often tell people you might be lucky to remember 10, 15, 20% the things that you learn if you go to a detox or if you go to a rehab and go to a bunch of classes. I couldn't absorb all that. So now I leave, and now I've got all this world stuff. And for me, it was eventually going back to school. But there's a reason why, for example, if you had a back surgery or a knee surgery or a shoulder surgery, you might not be able to go back right to your working situation in your everyday life because there had to be a rehabilitation process, not just for range of motion and reducing swelling. We're talking about the brain here. Yeah, we're reducing swelling and poison, but now the brain is absorbing so much more than it ever had to in a clear mind. So I struggled. I struggled with school. Some people struggle going back to work right away when they were used to doing things in an altered state. I thought it made me better. So how do we combat that? Would it be ideal for people to take FMLA and be able to work part-time and do all those things first? Absolutely. As a society, are we there yet? And treat this like, hey, if you're doing hard labor and you got a knee injury, you obviously can't. Why do we even pretend that you can? Well, we're not doing that with addiction yet, but we got that with physical injuries. My hope is we'll eventually get there with this brain condition and full body condition as well. But what do I tell people? Be easy on yourself. Don't expect you to be able to do what you can, even in that altered state. Mm-hmm. So if you work from home, or if you work in an office, take 15-minute breaks. Treat it like you're a chronic smoker, except don't actually smoke, and go to the bathroom, or take a mindful meditation, or go for a mindful walk, or get fresh air, or go get your coffee or your water and take 5, 10, 15 minutes. Or say you're going to go vape, whatever it is, but allow your brain to go, okay, I just absorbed this information with my rational logic brain. I absorbed this with the cerebral cortex. And now I'm going to allow my brain to, I don't have to be on.
Mm. Yeah, that's a very practical suggestion. Basically, what you're saying, the way I'm interpreting is that no need to increase the capacity, but reduce the demand, And as you were talking to, I was reflecting on my own experience about, I associated, because I was playing in a band, playing music a lot and then singing, and I was always intoxicated every time I do that, stopping and staying sober. And whenever I play guitar and try to do that, I just felt disappointed in myself, Yeah. But I had to be patient with myself, only to find out later that I'm actually much better, But it took me a long time to be patient with that. So that's a practical advice, but also something that is hard to absorb. Again, that ego thing is that
ego.
Yeah, don't limit what I can do. Don't underestimate me. I can do that.
Yeah.
But yeah, having people around and then kind of being patient with that is very practical. Yeah.
Hey listeners, we've got something extraordinary to share, a chance to reshape your journey no matter where you are. You're familiar with Zalmal's insights on our podcast, but there's more. Through the Recovery Collective, he offers life, mindfulness, recovery coaching, and meditation groups guiding you toward a fulfilled and mindful existence, no matter your location. Zal's journey from a Burmese Buddhist novice to a skilled practitioner equips him with timeless wisdom and contemporary strategies. Whether you're navigating life's shifts, seeking clarity, or pursuing self-awareness, Zal's coaching serves as a compass guiding you toward success. The best part? Zal's approach centers on your growth and empowerment. He equips you with tools to tap into your inner strengths for continuous evolution no matter where you are. Ready to take that next step in your personal growth journey? Connect with Zalmal and the Recovery Collective at 240-813-8135 from anywhere in the world. Investigating in your journey reaps immeasurable rewards. Let Zalmal guide you toward resilience, clarity, and empowerment no matter where life finds you. Now, let's transition back into our conversation. Stay tuned, stay curious, and keep your journey growing. Which I think it's so important when you are in a detox or a residential treatment facility and an intensive outpatient to learn and have this insight of this is what you're facing. This is why maybe part of the reason why you've relapsed in the past, or so many other people often relapse in the past, because just like with depression or anxiety, I can't tangibly see it like surgery on my elbow or my shoulder and my knee. If I try to walk on an ACL injury, I know it's going to bust open and it's going to be miserable and painful. It's kind of hard that when we're talking about the brain and look at this as a brain disease. So allow yourself to be where you're at. Because let's look at this. The inability to think clearly can affect your self-esteem in a negative way, increase stress. And I want to escape stress because that's what I did when I was using. And I know a solution for that with my rational, logical brain that's damaged. And that's the cycle of relapse for a lot of people, doing too much. I'm fortunate I work with a lot of people that are younger, and they go from wanting to do all these classes as opposed to piecemealing, maybe taking a class or 2 or 3, or doing their career job that is unbelievably stressful, and they don't know if they want to make this their job to their career. Well, there can be benefits to a quote unquote get well job if you have that opportunity to do so, where you can focus on the recovery, processing, and emotional well-being, and before you get to the significant stress, prioritizing. Yeah.
Yeah, patience is a virtue. It's hard to practice that.
So memory problems. That's a big one. We talk about the brain being damaged from top to bottom. After the cerebral cortex, we get to the midbrain, specifically the hippocampus, which is often has a direct effect on memory and emotion. So that part's damaged. And when I give an example, many years ago, I was working in an outpatient setting, and this guy in his 40s, he moved to a sober house. He was going to an outpatient active in 12-step recovery support groups. And he would go home at the end of the night to see his wife and his child and go back to the sober house. And one day he went back home, and he was really connecting with the guys in the sober house and the fellowship of recovery fellowship. And his wife gave him a honey-do list, and it was, I think, football season. And he did some of those things in that honey-do list. And he went to the sober house to watch the football game, and he came back the next day, and it was, college football Saturday, and then it was Sunday, and his wife's looking at him, and I said, "You forgot to cut the grass." "Oh, sorry, I totally forgot all about it." So then he does some other things around the house, plays with his daughter, does one or two things on the honey-do list, and then it's football Sunday, so he went back to the watching football with the guys in the sober house. So his wife calls him up, "Get over here." "Well, about what?" He's already stressed, right? The trigger of active use for years and decades, and he's coming home, and she's just there, sitting there, tapping her foot. And he walks in, and he goes, "You forgot to cut the grass again." "Oh, honey, I'm so sorry. It just slipped my mind once again. I just totally forgot about it." And she said, "You're acting more messed up now than you would when you're using." "I think you are using." Stress went up, inability to think clearly, lacked some other coping skills. It was the weekend. Yes, he had the guys in the sober house, but didn't go to a meeting that day. Didn't have his IOP on Friday either. And then he said, "I didn't get sober to feel this way." So the memory problems, and that just goes hand in hand with the inability to think clearly. But these are big stressors and triggers for people.
Yeah, that's difficult. I can relate to all that. I guess, it keeps coming back to that question at the back of my mind about where's the hope? Because that negative thinking or catastrophe. Yeah. So I'm going to be like this forever. That's where my addict and the alcoholic brain takes me. This will never pass. Yeah. I'm going to be this forgetful person, inability to think, not functional, not intelligent, not creative. This is how sobriety looks like for the rest of my life, So how do we help?
There is certainly a reason when those platitudes or those sayings, and certainly the acceptance that comes with Buddhist perspective, this too shall pass. It will not always be this way. And once again, it's giving ourselves permission that I might not remember what I was doing or who I was talking to or what was on that to-do list 15 minutes ago. It's another example of, let me accept where I'm at in this process. Oh man, if I was using for days, weeks, months, decades, just like a physical injury or a surgery or rehab, the same thing is true with this. I can give myself permission that I might not be where I want to be. But if I give myself the permission to know that is quite possible, and often people begin to see that in the detox, in the residential, in the PHP, in the IOP phase, if they're in treatment, man, you're right, I'm not as sharp. Man, I forgot I was supposed to do that assignment for my counselor. Oh man, it's already this time, I missed the meeting. We begin to see that in treatment and allow ourselves to the insight, this won't last. I am healing. I am no longer poisoning myself. It's a beautiful thing. Tell our trusted friends that, hey, I'm not as sharp. I've heard some old school facilities give for quote unquote graduation. You don't graduate from recovery or rehab. That's not a thing. But during the graduation process or the completion stage, they would give their clients marbles. Hey, you got your marbles back. And we can see the humor in that, but we can also see the insight and go, oh, this is going to happen and this is okay if it does happen. Allow myself to get 15-minute increments to my life. Sometimes we do that with cravings. Why can't we do that for our memory and our concentration? And we need support through that. Hey, I'm not going to be as sharp. It's not because I'm using. You're going to see other signs if I'm using, if I'm this lack of sharpness or memory issues.
What you just said about this too shall pass, I do want to interject a thought here, which I'm not sure if it's entirely Buddhist or it will be just like a philosophy. It just got me thinking about time, right? Past, present, and future. That when I say this too shall pass, or when I cannot accept it, that it's going to be like this forever, I'm like stuck in this like fixed thinking. I mean, from the point of view of karma, action and reaction, So where I am today is as a result of what I have done in the past. But I have responsibility and power for the future. So that's where the acceptance comes in. Like I have this memory problem, inability to think as a result of what I have done to my brain. But like, I cannot do anything about it. I can choose not to, and I'm going to be like this forever. Of course, if I don't do anything. But then the action that I take today will have positive effect on my life in the future. I feel like that's where the essence of recovery is, to believe that change is possible. Because, I've been there where I'm like, oh, I'm here already, and this is going to be like this forever, which is like, I'm not going to do anything about it since I'm going to be like this. Let me just go back to my old way. But then having people to help, I guess that's also why the power of that recovery community is that, no, just take actions anyway, and it's going to pay off down the line. It's not like waiting for recovery to happen. I have to take action.
I certainly wouldn't wish this on anyone, but when I had clients that stereotypically you'll hear it called wet brain, there's this condition called, and I butcher a lot of terms, so it's called Wernicke's or Korsakoff's. I might have butchered that, where there's malnourishment of the brain. And when other clients see those conditions and see to the level of short-term memory issues, communication concerns, lack of concrete intellectual thinking, there is a big difference between some short-term memory stuff with post-acute withdrawal and other very significant brain conditions where, oh wow, I'm not that bad, end quote, or, oh, I'm really worried about that person. I'm much better off than I thought I was. I wouldn't wish that on anyone, but when I had clients with those conditions, it was very telling, and it put things in perspective for them. Yeah, they might have some memory issues right now, but the fear and ego can go, and I can have the support to get me through this and allow my body and brain to heal. Hopefully I didn't butcher that term too bad. I always do. So let's get to the third symptom or syndrome, part of the syndrome, group of symptoms. Emotional overreaction or emotional numbness. I'm a huge advocate for, I call it, when I'm working with my clients that are in recovery or want some version of sobriety or minimize or use, I call it emotional sobriety. And one thing that can be certainly challenging after the detox stage, especially in those first year, definitely those first 3, 6, 9 months, is the emotional overreaction, the emotional roller coaster, the high highs, the low lows, some people say making a mountain out of a molehill, the inability to cope with emotions because, you know what, I've got the number one coping skill and I get to numb out and I can change the way I feel with substances. So that emotional awareness and the emotional roller coaster. So this is saying that this is part of the symptoms of post-acute withdrawal, that there's a reason why there's that emotional overreaction. Well, we damaged the part of the brain that's responsible for that, and part of that is the hippocampus, where, we rewire our brain to want and need and cope with substances, but that part of the brain is also affected by alcohol and drugs as well.
Yeah, that resonates a lot with me about emotional. Yeah, it just reminds me that easily irritable, right? Like everything pisses me off, some little things, or not being able to feel at all. But again, like I like the fact that we're terming it as acute withdrawal syndrome, because my negative thinking can conclude that this is my makeup, that I'm emotionally numb, I'm emotionally unavailable. And, it also makes me think of the allergy, right? Abnormal reaction.
Yeah.
Like when I'm emotionally like that, I feel like I'm allergic to life, that I am responding abnormally to really big things as like, oh, that's not important. Or like really tiny little things as, oh, this is the end of the world, Yeah. So like, it's a tough existence.
And when you're in treatment, you get to process that emotional reaction that we have in treatment, whether it's in an outpatient, whether it's in a treatment facility, because it's going to happen. You're with other people, and then you're dealing with the life outside of the room or the rehab or the detox or the outpatient, and you're coming with this real life stuff that leads to stress. And a good facilitator is going to help you process, one, what you're actually thinking and feeling, two, how you are currently coping with it or have you coped with it in the past, and three, what's a healthy way to cope with it? What are you actually thinking and feeling now? What are these other perspectives from people in the group that you can walk through this and make this intense emotion more right-sized? And that's powerful work. And that's going to affect the brain in a positive way. Oh, I'm not just going on impulse. Oh, I am dealing with this feeling, and it's not making me want to numb out or just hide or run or chaos or whatever it is. And for some people, it makes the reaction more appropriate to the event. Or if you're emotionally overloaded, you get to dissect some of these emotions, and you're not going to be completely numb or completely chaos through the roof. And all of a sudden you can put these in the little pieces and make sense of them and go, okay, I'm not numbing this out. I'm not feeling better or high and feel differently. And I can think through this, feel through this, and ultimately act through this. Mm-hmm. And that, to me, is the action and the power of treatment.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm really grateful of this conversation. I know I'm only a drink away and a drug away, but it just makes me grateful that I went through that, and then happily here. But also, like, being an addict has a lot to do with control too.
Yes.
Right? That's also why, like, when in my drinking and using days, I created emotions like that's that instant gratification, that if I'm not feeling good, I want to feel good right away. Yeah. And if I'm feeling something terrible, I want to numb it out, Yeah. So like my brain is so used to that. So like to be in a place where emotions are all out of place, I don't like that, because I want to be in control of my emotions. Yeah. It's just so difficult, so challenging to be open to a new way.
We call that the pleasure center of the brain, the dopamine hit. You explained it perfectly. That's why the addiction goes from choice to no choice, or, oh, I only know how to act and react this way. And this is my biggest kind of crusade. Get treatment for this, whether it's therapy, relapse prevention group, outpatient, to process these things. That is why therapy is just so valuable for this process. It's hard to see or think or feel. Remember, the rational, logical part of the brain is not where it could be or should be in terms of optimal, logical, concrete, healthy thinking. So the emotional brain is damaged and the logical brain isn't there yet. But if you're in treatment, guess what begins to rewire and begins to potentially, this is just my belief, whether it's heal faster or appropriately, is going to help the logical brain and reasoning, because you are experiencing, feeling, talking, working through, and what you're going to take out of the room, whether it's therapy, whether it's a group.
Yeah. So it goes back to that question again, like, where is hope? Mm-hmm. So it gets better.
Yeah.
In my experience, it did get better, but like that lingering part, my memory is terrible, so I've accepted it, and I'll just work on my recovery no matter what. And then a couple of months later, I still have the same memory problem. How do I instill hope within myself that I'm making progress?
I'm never going to do this, but I would love to. I have a relapse prevention group that's been going on for years, and I still have a lot of the same members in that relapse prevention group for years, not because they quote unquote need it, because they get a lot of support, hope, installation of recovery and health and wellness and spirituality. And it's just a part of their daily routine, just like praying or meditating or going to the gym. It's part of their routine that they get and like, not because they are suffering. Mm-hmm. So when I have new group members that come to this group, I've got more than a handful of people with multiple years of sobriety in this group by choice. And that installation of hope is passed down from their experiences from another person. That, you know what? When they had 30 days or they just got out of detox or residential treatment, they knew exactly what it was like and how they felt. And they can look back of their skewed perspectives and thoughts and what they were doing in early recovery that, you know, they stayed sober through, but thank goodness they had support and hope from others to help walk them through this early part of recovery. So the power's in their experiences and treatment. There's hope. Mm-hmm. If there wasn't hope, there wouldn't be the need for treatment. Mm-hmm. That's part of hope, is being able to get treatment or therapeutic gain, and there's so much hope in that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, good stuff. About that dysfunctional brain, you know, if that's the only thing that I have, I'm doomed. But the recovery community and the treatment is that, no, let me just put that aside, you know, mm-hmm. And it is possible to borrow something else, some kind of coping skill, and then let that part of the brain heal instead of trying too hard to fix it while it's not fixable.
Oh, and to see in a matter of whether it's numbness or emotional, quote unquote, overreaction, and then see the brain and the processing come together. And it's almost like a light bulb. Some people call it a spiritual experience for some. Like, oh, to have that relief in a matter of, 5 minutes to an hour is just powerful. And that does positive things to the brain. It rewires it. Mm-hmm. Very cool.
Yeah. I mean, again, it's really good to have this information, whether I like it or not, accept it or not, but to know that, okay, this is what I'm going through.
Yeah.
As opposed to what is wrong with me.
And when that happens, it goes from no longer shutting down or the efforts to, oh, I just worked through something. And I did that with support, and I did that in treatment, and I did that through processing. I can do it again. Let's keep going, huh? That's a good one. That's one of my favorite ones. You could probably hear it through my passion. Let's jump to sleep disturbances, sleep problems. So they're saying that this is, once again, part of this whole post-acute withdrawal syndrome. Let's talk about the how. One of the statistics is if you drink 6 hours before you go to sleep, it can affect your sleep cycle. 6 hours. That's it. Not like, hey, we're going out to the bar or drinking at home watching sports and it's 9, 10, 11, right? 6 hours before. There's two kinds of waves, and I use this as a general term. If there's any neuroscientists out there, this is a general way for people to understand. 2 waves of sleep, slow wave cycle, and REM, rapid eye movement. Mm-hmm. And in general, you should go to 4 to 6 cycles of this in a night, which in general is why a full night's sleep is right around 8 hours. Now, they've done some research and they see if you drink 6 hours before you go to sleep, if not shorter than that your rapid eye movement is affected. Some people don't get any rapid eye movement. So the whole expression, you pass out and come to, kind of is a true statement. If you do this for days, weeks, months, years, decades, like we've said, your REM might be affected for a very long time. And your brain goes, oh, I need these substances to pass out. Or when you're sober, you might not be getting this REM. And one or two things can happen. REM rebound, where your brain goes, oh, finally. And all of a sudden your brain's like a sponge. Give me this REM, give me this REM. And a lot of times people have vivid lucid dreams, or what I often saw in residential treatment is that people had a hard time sleeping, and they might not get that REM sleep sometimes for a very long time. Now, I felt for the people detoxing, shaking and baking, sweating, vitals all out of whack. That's tough. But when you can't fall asleep to save your life for sometimes multiple days on end, you can feel like you're going crazy. I felt bad for them. I really did. But where's the hope? Where's the hope, Zal?
Where's the hope? Great question. I mean, it just brings up so much memories for me too in my own days of struggles. Again, it's about control, right? I cannot fall asleep. I'm sober. So let me just use to fall asleep, to pass out, Well, I'm sleeping a lot because I'm sober. Let me use things that will keep me up. Yeah, that's my hope, right?
Yeah.
When I'm in my active addiction and alcoholism. Yeah, I mean, are there medications or how do you
Absolutely.
help people?
There are all kinds of medications and supports, and trust your doctors that have experience with addiction to walk you through that. There's all kinds of medications. And ironically, that was a Freudian slip. There's also meditations that can help with that. Mm-hmm. Because when your brain waves are going crazy and wild, and all of a sudden you can't escape your stress and your thoughts and all these things, well, guess what meditation can help you with? Mm-hmm. Potentially push some of those thoughts out and allow your wave cycle to go from high energy stress to push out your thoughts. And then it can slow your wave cycle. And meditation wave state is the closest wave state to sleep. Yeah. So here's my suggestion. And I'm a true advocate, believe this in this. I believe in sleep hygiene, especially if you're not sleeping. I've told this to many groups in patient setting. Sometimes people would get really, really angry and say, I can't sleep, and I totally get it. I could empathize and sympathize with them, but I asked them, how many cups of coffee are you drinking a day? I don't know, 8. When's your last cup of coffee? 8 p.m. Okay, stop doing that. When are you taking a shower? Right before I go to sleep. Well, you were doing 2 things that people do to stay awake. So part of the sleep hygiene or the structure is, stop drinking coffee before dinner. Take your showers in the morning and not the night. Do the routine. Do a meditation right before you go to sleep. Do a meditation till you fall asleep. But most importantly, you might wake up every hour and not go to sleep. But to me, this is important. No matter what you do, wake up at the exact same time every morning. So if you're waking up at 8, always wake up at 8. Eventually, people say, I fell asleep 5 minutes before finally. I just want to sleep. Okay, so your brain knows it wakes up at 8 a.m. and eventually that REM or that slow wave cycle will start earlier and earlier and earlier until your brain has this routine. So always wake up at the same time, do your routine at night, do the meditation, and I promise you, here's another example. This too shall pass. But do the things that you can, that you do have control over. Don't eat the high sugar stuff right before you go to bed. Eat your meal at a certain time before you go to bed. Do the meditation. Do your routine. Always wake up at the same time. This too shall pass. And you will, I promise you, you will go to sleep.
Yeah. Maybe my brain is too simple right now, but it keeps going back to those 2 things, like hope and patience, Good. Patience is the least forte for an addict,
Yeah.
But like whatever you're saying is all about like trusting and being patient, because I don't like healthy coping skills because I want right here, right now, the most intense things right away, But, things like diet, exercise, like getting up regularly at this time, just stick with it and it will get better, and be patient.
And I call it sleep hygiene, and maybe I give a lot of people a lot of reality, but being an athletic trainer when people were at their lowest with the least amount of control that they felt they had. And these athletes coming back from an injury or injured, I instilled hope in them. I gave them structure. I gave them support. I gave them guidance when they were at their lows and they didn't feel like they could do it. Hope was instilled. Patience was instilled. They did the action and the rehab and the treatment necessary, and they got back to where they were even better. Same thing with this. And we're just seeing how the brain affects this form.
Yeah. Yeah, really good stuff. And the good news is also like we have examples, people who are further in their recovery and went through all this. And then that, yes, this too did pass,
Yeah. There are other things like physical coordination problems, and I won't go in depth in this, but one of the reasons why dry drunk was called a dry drunk back in the day was you would see people who still had tremors and shakes or had balance issues weeks later because they looked like a drunk. We often hear dry drunk today in terms of someone that's not working a program and is irritability, frustration, anger, and still the behaviors of someone in active use. But yeah, those the balance, the coordination, dizziness, those things, sensitivity to light, headaches, and things like that can also be a part of this process. Remember, your brain can contract and expand and go, what's my normal steady state? It needs to heal. It heals bottom up. So the emotional instability, the numbness begins to heal first before we get to the top, the ration, logic, and reason. So the emotions really do come back before making sense of these things. So treatment, support, patience, hope, guidance is all part of the recovery process. Thoughts on this, though?
Yeah, just to conclude it all, like that concept of withdrawal, it's a huge thing for anything, as in my old beliefs, my old limited personal reality. Like whenever I am supposed to get to some kind of growth, I have to go through that withdrawal, If I have a limited personality, limited beliefs, and if I want to get to another level, I got to withdraw from my limited belief. And it's a very uncomfortable process, but actually a good thing. So like, it makes me think of that, like we're so used to comfort. I just want to stay in my comfort zone, even if the change is appealing. No, I just want to stay in my comfort zone. But there's a leap because I'm withdrawing from my old reality, and it's uncomfortable. But it actually is a good thing when I'm feeling uncomfortable because growth is happening in the background,
Yeah.
So it just gives me that imagery of like when you withdraw, it's an uncomfortable process. The body is like, no, what are you doing to me? I'm not at ease anymore. But it actually is a good thing, and trusting that better days are coming is where hope is.
Yeah, well said. You have the insight, you have the support, and the appropriate action with sometimes the patience sprinkled in is a good recipe. We talked about that in terms of change equation as well. So, well, there you have it. If you guys got any questions on this, certainly let us know. And let me just do a little conclusion here.
Sounds good.
Obviously, seek help. Reach out for support and stay resilient during this challenging phase if you're past the detox phase and early recovery. By understanding and managing PAWS effectively, individuals can continue on the path. If you or someone you know is experiencing PAWS or facing challenges in early recovery, and there will be challenges, remember that you're not alone. Reach out to your support network, seek guidance from healthcare professionals, and like we said, if you have a knee injury or spiking high blood pressure, you would seek professional help, so do so here too. And embrace the power of self-care. With perseverance, appropriate action, and the right support, you have the ability to overcome the obstacles and continue on your way towards a brighter future. Thank you for joining our episode. We hope the insights and strategies discussed today will empower and inspire you on your recovery journey. Remember to subscribe to our podcast for more episodes that tackle important topics related to addiction recovery, personal growth, and all things health and wellness. My name is Luke.
Here's it all.
And we'll see you next time.
See you next time.